I'm so excited to
Okay.
have you both here. So let's jump right into it. We're talking about food insecurity, food justice in Canada. And before we do that, maybe I can just share the space with you guys and have you introduce yourselves, tell me what you work on. You're both part of organizations I really, really admire and am low-key obsessed with. So, um, Nadia, do you want to go first?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Nadia. I'm a dietitian and I work in Regent Park around as a dietitian, but also on multiple food insecurity and food injustice projects. But I'm wearing the hat of one of the co-founders of Dietitians for Food Justice. So we're a group of dietitians and nutrition students who are very passionate about how we can be a part of the solution, how we can be a part of the conversation and moving our communities closer to food justice. So very, very excited to be a part of this conversation. I love the fact that you guys are taking the spotlight because I think it's so important. And this platform is such a great one to be on. So thank you for having me, and I'm excited to share.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
It's great to meet you, Nadia. So I'm Hansel Igbavboa. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm an artist. I'm a storyteller. I'm a community organizer, food lover. Um, a lot of the work I do revolves around food. And of course, I'm working with FoodShare as the Right to Food campaign coordinator. So, yeah, a lot of the work I do is really within community, working on food projects with youth. Um, I recently also wrote, or still in the process of writing, a policy paper in collaboration with African Food Basket and the Center for Food Security Studies on defining Black food sovereignty for folks in Toronto. So I do a lot of work around food, and yeah, I'm excited to be here and have this conversation.
Um, I'm so excited to have the two of you. I think this is gonna be such a great chat. Just because not everyone is experts in food justice, I'm just gonna ask, and either one of you can answer it for them. What is food insecurity? And why is this something that all of us have to engage with? Maybe one of you can take one part of that question and someone else can take the other part of that question.
Yeah, so I can take the first part if you want to take the second. Yeah, so food insecurity is really is when someone is not able to access food, and the access piece, there are different barriers. So it's financial access, it's appropriate food access, it's geographical access, it's the barrier to being able to get enough healthy, nutritious food, right? So it's not just food in general, but it's healthy, nutritious food. And I think that when you're talking about household and food insecurity, really like at that individual level, oftentimes we talk about, you know, the barrier to people is really that financial access of not having enough money. But in terms of you know, the larger kind of system aspect of it, there's lots of intersecting factors that stop someone from being able to access the food that they need and the food that they want. Um, yeah, so that's kind of my perception of it.
Yeah, could you come again with the second part of the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Just,
mentioned.
I guess maybe instead of what we can all do about it, because I think we can talk about that as we go on, but maybe what are sort of the factors that affect food insecurity? I know that's like a giant question to just be like, answer this and let's go on, but just for those maybe who aren't as familiar with the subject, because I think I'm learning a lot too about this, and it's not as simple as you immediately think. You just, so yeah.
Yeah, I think Nadia has, spoke to some of the factors, if you want to call it that, that result in food insecurity. I think when we talk about food insecurity, it's important to understand that food insecurity is no siloed problem. It's not like an individual problem either. It's a national problem. It's a problem in the city. It's a problem with, intersecting or interlocking systems that affect people socially, economically, financially. So when we talk about food insecurity, we need to be talking about, livable wage. We need to be talking about affordable housing. We need to be talking about things that affect people ability to access food with dignity, as opposed to through food banks or having to beg, having to, um, like to basically suffer. Um, in certain sense, like to give up certain part of their dignity to access food. So I think we could just like start off with that because there's a lot more conversation to be had, but really it's thinking about like wages and it's thinking about people's employment. I think the perception around like who's food insecure also comes into question when you ask a question like that because
Mm-hmm.
people might assume that people who are food insecure don't work, but like 60% of people in the workforce are food insecure. 1 in 5 people in the country is food insecure. So it makes you wonder. It makes you think, like, what is the real cause and the root to food insecurity?
I think the first time I really thought about food security and food justice, I was on student council at Western, and we had a student food bank. And I remember, like, because of my privilege and not being in tuned into these issues yet, I remember just being like, oh, who would really need to act like it costs a lot of money to go to school? It doesn't make sense to me. And that was the first time that I sort of had to check myself and learn that it's not just the stereotype of a thing in your head of like someone who can't access food, but it could be a friend of yours, it could be someone you know, it could be literally could like there is no person that would that can like hold that identity in the full way. I mean, there are statistics that indicate it is very much a racial justice issue as well, but um, it is 60% of the like employed people, insecure people are also employed. Um, so I think maybe, and then another thing that I'd seen when I was younger was a conversation around having to make decisions around what to buy. So that like if you don't buy a tampon, people will know that you're on your period, but if you don't eat, no one will know. So it's like, and like the fact that someone would have to make a decision like that blows my mind. Um, so I think maybe what we can start with is the racial justice component, just because that's really close to, I think, all of our hearts. Why is food justice a racial justice issue?
Okay, I can. Well,
Yeah,
just to,
go ahead.
Just like easy
um,
question.
yes, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, so there's lots there. I just wanted to go back to one thing you said around like, when you're in university and learning about these concepts, like we know that food insecurity, especially on campuses, is actually really, really high, right? So you can imagine as someone who's having to pay fees and work and also study, like it's the perfect kind of um, and often jobs that are the minimum wage or low paid, like inadequately paid jobs, right? So it's the perfect kind of soup for that to be created in. I also think that, you know, just to give you kind of a framing of how people manage it, because it's not oftentimes on the front lines of what I'm seeing with clients who are struggling to pay for their food or healthy food. You know, people are going to make decisions right around that tampon versus like a food, but where their primary source of food comes from Dollarama, right? And making those type of decisions about where you shop in order to be able to feed yourself and not go in that traditional sense of hungry, and feeding yourself food that optimize your health, is not going to give you that quality of life in the future that everyone should have as a right. um, so in terms of food, racial justice is food justice. I mean, that was the premise of our nutrition month. So one of the things that Dietitians for Food Justice did this year, and I'm very proud of, is that we kind of changed. We tried in our small world to change the conversation in Nutrition Month. So March is Nutrition Month, and dietitians started that month to talk about healthy eating. And one of the things that our group found was those conversations were really focused on individual responsibility and promotion of the profession. But when you talk about that individual responsibility around healthy eating, it's irresponsible for our profession to be talking about that without any recognition of, you know, the barriers and the problems around that stop people from being able to even have the choice, right, of healthy eating. And I think this year specifically, we really wanted to focus in on that theme of racial justice is food justice for very obvious reasons, but also because it's so true. And a shout out to FoodShare, because you guys, with the Proof Project, you know, put out some of the first race-based data I've ever seen in Canada around food insecurity, right? Showcasing that what 3 points, like a Black household is 3.6 times more likely to be food insecure than a white household. And that's across the country, and it's a huge statistic, right? So like there's almost 4 households for every one white household that is food insecure and Black. And I think like you can't ignore that. I mean, it's much more complex than that, but I think just even being able to have that data to showcase it when we knew it was an issue, but the extent to it is still pretty shocking, and definitely something we need to do more about.
Yeah, I think, and I'll just note here for our community that's watching, part of the reason why we wanted to talk about food justice is that there has been such an interest on our grid to talk about racial justice with regards to Indigenous issues, as well as Black Lives Matter and Black, and like, I think when you show up in solidarity for these communities, caring about things like food justice is part of that. It's, we always say it on our grid, like it's not enough to be like post up on Instagram Square and move on. But this is how you show up every day, is like engaging in the work around food justice, because it is a racialized issue and it disproportionately affects Black and Indigenous people. So that's just like this is why it connects to our grid moment. But I think Hansel, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think when we talk about food justice as being racial justice, we need to reflect on the foundations of Canada. Like how was Canada founded? How was this country founded? And what are the foundations of this country? Because the foundations of this country are very much the foundations of our food system, which is upon white supremacy, land theft, racism, slavery. And though many of these things are not like always, as blatant, actually they're just as blatant because, and I don't want to get into that conversation, but we need to think about the foundations of a food system, because they're founded upon like very heinous things that continue to still disproportionately affect Black and Indigenous people. They continue to impoverish Black and Indigenous people. They continue to put them at a social economic disadvantage. So when we think about that, like it really just makes you think. So if we want to solve the problems we're having within our food system, thinking about food insecurity, thinking about food access, and like people having choice to choose what they want to eat, to be able to choose food from their culture, for them to have that choice and be able to access that food with dignity, that can only be done if there's racial justice, if there's reconciliation, because we can't have it without that.
Oh, I think that's so important. Yeah,
I
basically
know
just decolonize everything.
I keep wanting to press the heart, and I was like, okay, I have to snap, because everything you're saying, I'm just like, oh yes, on point, on point, on point.
My second sort of question is, so I think that for most people who aren't engaged in the space of food justice and food insecurity and such, like we think immediately of food banks. And as I have been learning more about this through like the content we're creating and stuff, I've come to understand that like, yes, like that food banks aren't the solution here. Which is wild, because I feel like every year we have these like fundraising initiatives through grocers and all of these like places that you go that are like, bring in canned food, and you feel like you're doing this big thing. And I'm not saying that's not important. I know in the immediate moment perhaps it is, but what is actually a real solution? Like, let's talk about food banks and then maybe go into like what are the other solutions here, the real sustainable long-term ones.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, definitely I've been bombarded already around like a lot of these campaigns that are focused on food bank, or I think this weekend there's even craft pantry day, which I could probably spend a lot of time ranting upon because I think like the charity model, as you said, is not the solution, right? It's a band-aid solution to something that will never be solved through that avenue. And I think corporate interests being involved in that charity solution brings a whole other kettle of fish around ethics, but also why are they engaging in those specific ways? How are they benefiting from those specific ways that they're engaging? Because I think there's a lot there. And I would say, um, you know, as an individual, and especially at times where we're as a society reflecting on like how do we help our fellow Canadians. I understand the need to or the desire to individually contribute, and I think like contributing money can be a very powerful tool. And I think we need to have more conversations at different levels, um, about where to put that money, right? So I mean, definitely, FoodShare is an organization that I would definitely advocate to give money to. But I think one of the things that you can do that also um, is very, very important is finding indigenous led groups within your communities and making sure that your dollars go to those organizations, because I think it's really, really important to make sure that your money is going to organizations that are led and directed by the people who are most impacted, that we know, as we said from the previous conversation, are most impacted. African Food Basket also is a great one. I think organizations that are working, like Hansel said, around um, empowering people versus just giving whatever food is available, because it's very important that it's food that's appropriate. It's very important that it's food that's cultural and acceptable in a dignified manner. And some of the organizations that like African Food Basket, like FoodShare, are working really in critical ways to reframe the system so that we don't have to rely on these charity systems necessarily, and hopefully envision a world where we won't, right, ever have to rely on a food bank.
Hmm. Indeed. I would just like to basically resend what you said, Nadia. It's important for us to know where to divert our attention to and put more resources to. And just to the point of like what Future is doing, just plug in that like we're launching our Right to Food campaign today, and we're working with some community organizations like you mentioned, African Food Basket, working with Unity Kitchen, Dashma One, so they feed the people. These are community grassroots organizations that work directly with community to provide not only just emergency services, but many of them have visions for the future of what a food secure city could look like in Toronto. So it's important that we are supporting things that look to a better future, that don't have community relying on food banks, relying on charity. It's important that we look to more sustainable means of
Mm-hmm.
securing our community. And just to the conversation of food banks, I think one, just even looking at picking like at random a food bank in the city of Toronto, because that's where I'm at. And looking at the infrastructures around food banks, it's like they do not have the infrastructure to actually solve the problem of food insecurity. And we saw it during COVID-19, because at the start of the pandemic, a lot of food banks closed down because a lot of them relied on volunteers. A lot of them did not have the capacity to provide food in a time when a lot of people needed food the most, because a lot of people were out of their jobs. A lot of people, could not afford food at that time. So when the city and people in the city needed food banks the most, they vanished. They disappeared because they do not have the infrastructure to actually address food insecurity. And honestly, that in turn really speaks to the fact that food insecurity is just not about food provision,
Yeah.
because I think that's been the response from the Canadian government, from the city for the longest time. You can't solve an issue that's beyond food with just providing food, because how much food would you continue to provide? How long can you continue to do that? And that's why it's important to support organizations that are thinking about, like, how can community provide food for themselves? How can they grow their own food? How can they create their own food system? There are organizations doing that. St. Jamestown Co-op, African Food Basket, many of those grassroots community organizations are already doing the work. It's just a matter of supporting that work, both from the city, from all levels of government, from people who, feel good when they, donate a couple of cans or donate some money to food banks. Like, why not redivert your money to, what can actually build a better sustainable food system for community?
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that.
And just like one more stat I like have in the back of my brain for some reason, but I think like the Proof Project has done research around like what percentage of people who are experiencing food insecurity actually access food banks, and I think it's like 25%. So it's not even reaching the majority of people who are experiencing food insecurity, right? So it's a really inadequate system, unfortunately, for many reasons. But yeah, totally.
And the project is a research institute around through University of Toronto, right? That is doing work around food insecurity. I only found that out last week, so it's brand new to me.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say Proof is housed within U of T. And they've done research in the past. A lot of the research they do is basically analysis of Statistic Canada from census and from surveys that also attach to the census. And these are resources that are out there for people to see. And I just wanted to make mention that even the stats around racial disparity of who is experiencing food insecurity, the first information that came out around that actually came out in 2017 and not the most recent analysis that was done. So there's a proof research that was released in 2017, 2018, I believe, that showed that like 29.2% of Indigenous households are experiencing food insecurity and 28.9% of Black households are experiencing food insecurity. So this is, it's out there, and I think I'm grateful that there's more and more research being done around this. We definitely need to do more.
Yeah. And then I think with that, as we talk about how food is not really the answer, like food banks aren't really the answer to this giant issue. As someone who really cares about policy and government rules and regulations, we kind of touched on it earlier, but it really feels like there is enough food in the world for everyone, for there not to be zero, like any hunger in the world. We've got enough food. And in a country as wealthy as Canada, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that there are so many people that experience hunger or lack of adequate food. So what role does our government have to play in this? And I also would really, and I know this is going to come out, but if we can also talk about guaranteed livable income, because it blows my mind that that's not a thing that we have in this country when we have the money. Like, in where my ancestors are from, like maybe that's not an option there, but here in this country, like it feels like it should. And shouldn't everyone have like a full stomach? Like I don't know. It blows my brain out.
Do you want to start? I feel like I'm starting everyone. Do you want to start?
No, you can go ahead.
No, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Oh Lord, I think there's a lot to talk about. I think I would start on the city level, just even thinking practically what can be done in the city of Toronto. So as part of our campaign for the right to food, we're asking for the city of Toronto to revise a food charter that was passed 20 years ago, and it's redundant. It misses a lot of the nuanced issues that we're experiencing in the city. It is very much inadequate. Just to sum it up, and it's ineffective and inactive. So we're asking for the city to revive that food charter with community. So basically, just rewrite it with the folks and the groups and the communities that most affected by food insecurity in our city, um, and have a mechanism for this food charter to be enforced and for the city to be accountable to community. That's one simple way, and that's just one step of many things the city could do. We all know recently the city passed at council the Black Food Sovereignty Plan. So, that's a good win, but like we need to see action. We need to see the city of Toronto take like tangible action towards, actually supporting what they have passed in council. So it's like thinking about even organizations, grassroots organizations are definitely mostly all the time looked over and looked past when they're the ones who actually carry the weights. They're the ones who actually work directly with community, and oftentimes they're the ones who do not get the funding. They do not, get the support from the city. They always have to go through huddles and red tapes to access, resources that in abundance through the city, for example. Many of them looking for spaces to distribute food within the city. Many of them looking for spaces to house, initiatives that will help build a localized food system for community. So there's many, many, many ways for the city to support, because many of these grassroots organizations are saying what they need.
Mm-hmm.
They're communicating what they need. They're saying what they need. So it's a matter of the city of Toronto listening and paying attention and supporting these organizations. I just leave it at that for now.
Okay, so we've done municipal. Do we want to move on to the federal responsibility here with that?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think these are all really good questions, and I think I love the fact that it's following the conversation around the food banks, because I think part of the problem with the charity model is that it depoliticizes the issue, right? It's like, well, we don't have to do anything because these food banks are taking care of hunger. So we don't need to take a critical look at our income assistance policies, which are inadequate and people are food insecure in large percentages there, right? Or our income equity in any sense, right? You never hear that conversation. I think that provincially is definitely something we need to advocate for around income equity, social assistance rates. There have been, really great projects that I've been part of. One I'm thinking of in Nova Scotia, which was a participatory food costing project. So basically, we would go out, and dietitians do this across the country. So it's been done, for many, many years. We cost what it costs for the average person to buy what Health Canada says is the basic diet in order for you to meet your nutritional needs. To not even to optimize your health, so not to live a very healthy, happy life, but just the basic needs, right? And so we cost it across the province. And in what Nova Scotia did through Patty Williams at Mount St. Vincent University was take a participatory lens to it. So we engaged people who experienced food insecurity all the way up to the government level and public health, decision makers, academic students, kind of all along that spectrum. We did the food costing. Oftentimes it was people who were experiencing food insecurity were the ones to go into the grocery store and cost that food out. And so they were the ones who were able to then come to the table and see the data and see it cost $8 for a 4-liter milk in this rural part of Nova Scotia. And in Halifax, it was $4, right? So they were able to see it's not a budgeting issue. But then we were able to create affordability scenarios. And this is a piece that I think was really important for the influence at the provincial level, but having the food costing scenario. So saying a single mother with 2 kids who's on income assistance, and showing how inaffordable that basic diet is. And then we were able to then use that to advocate at the provincial level for an increase in income assistance rates. They're still inadequate, but I think having that pressure, communicating in different ways to the government around the inadequacy of their income policies is really important. I think moving beyond that and making sure that, you know, each level of our government also has, you know, anti racism, anti oppression, anti decolonization as part of all their policies, not just a separate one, is also really important. So although, you know, we're in the food field, you don't need to be in the food field to like bring this to your table, right? And to your government. Because I think if all of us take it to all of our spheres, then we have a chance at transforming the system, restructuring the system. And that's really the only way to have real change. You can't have this incremental change. You can't have performative change, right?
Mm.
So there's those pieces where I think we need to engage people who are most affected. We need to have conversations, speak the language, I think a lot of the time, of these provincial governments. We have to do that. And I think we just have to keep the pressure on around income, because I think that's it's not the only thing that we need to be doing, but I think it's a very important one.
Yeah, and places like Ontario have a provincial election coming up. So when you think about, like, I mean, it's months and months away right now, but like it's coming up, and something I'll be looking very carefully for is guaranteed livable income, because it gives people a little bit of dignity in how they carry their lives and able to live, and don't we all deserve that? Like, it doesn't seem like something that should be politicized at this point in history. I know that we said 30 minutes. So I just wanted to check in with the two of you if you wanted to wrap up or if you wanted to answer more questions. Let me check in first.
I'm okay I'm easy. I don't have anything else after this, so.
I'm good to continue going if we have to.
Okay. I think something that I really like to frame, like end off these things with, and sometimes it's hard to, is what can I do as an individual? What can I do in my community? And what can I ask of my government? So from what we've been talking about today, I sort of feel like as an individual, one of the things I could do is redirect any personal donations or work that I'm doing into some of the places that you both listed today, like Toronto FoodShare. And we're going to put together a community amplified post that lists some of the stuff as well, but putting it into sort of these grassroots initiatives that aren't really based on a sort of corporate charity model of existing. So I think that's something, as a community, bringing up these discussions in spaces that aren't related to, that don't feel related, but could be, whether it's a workplace, whether it's at dinner with your friends and family, and starting normalizing a discussion around food justice, as well as looking at what your local township or city is doing to show up and take action. And then I think when we look at federally, it's maybe mobilizing to write letters to your elected officials to ask them to take action around food insecurity, in particular around things like guaranteed livable income, and understanding the intersectionality of this issue. Is there anything else that you guys would add to sort of to that?
I guess sign the right to food would be a really important
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, we can definitely
Yeah.
talk about that as well.
I think it is extremely important to even like do, you know, a little work in understanding um the the framing of like food insecurity, like understanding that, like, again, it is everybody's problem. It is not just a few people's problem. It's not just a few people experiencing it. A lot of people are experiencing this problem. So, and also seeing food as not a commodity, but as a right. Like, it is our right to access food. We should be able to access food in the ways we wish to. We should have the choice of food. Even if this, and accessing food, also talking about like we should be able to grow our own food if we want to. That is part of access. It's our human right. Every human being who is on this land and in this area should be able to have that right. And it's as simple as that. Like that fundamental understanding of that would really help you, navigate like, so what can I do or what do I do? And I think it's important to not ostracize like who needs to be doing something
Mhm.
because many people who are watching this are experiencing food insecurity to whatever degree, to varying degrees. So it's not just about like what can I do, but it's like how can we work together? Like what can we do? To continue to support the works of the people who are, on the front lines, on the grassroots. And also, I think the biggest thing for me is like look into the grassroots organizations who are doing this work because they're the ones who are the front lines of community and following their leads. Really.
Well, thank you so, so, so much, both of you. Nadia, do you have any closing thoughts or?
No, I think he did a great job. I don't want to follow that. I think there's nothing else to say.
Well, thank you both for being here. When we post this, we'll tag all the organizations we both mentioned today, as well as the ones that you're from. Thank you so much, and let's keep this discussion going. Please always know that if you send something our way to amplify, we'll share it on their stories. Like this stuff is too important to be a one-off discussion, so we're happy to help keep it alive, but by working with experts like the two of you. So
Thank you for having me.
thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.